Okay, and could I introduce Stuart and Valerie, because real quick, Valerie, if you want to say something about stop targeting, how poor, you might make the connection between the Israeli spending and what,
Human rights, civil rights.
Yeah, I'm not, Mara, you
I'll
forgive.
pass.
Okay, well,
Thanks.
we have two great people in the room. Stuart, I want to tell one quick story. So Abdul Rahman came here on Fulbright. He couldn't get out of Gaza, except that Condoleezza Rice intervened at the last minute and got him out of Gaza to come to Cleveland State. 2 years business administration. He worked with that John Ging guy, the administrator for the UN in Gaza. So he went back and he had a job. So Abdul Rahman we got to know very well. What a sweet guy. We had a going away party at Doug's house. And Dennis Kucinich came, and Mike, as usual, set it up. It was wonderful. Remember when? But anyway, Abdul Rahman was looking up something on the computer, and he found Stuart online, and it's called the Self-Hating Israel Threatening Jews. If you do the acronym, it's SHIT. And so Abdul Rahman proudly announced that Stuart, who didn't know it, was on this list. So Stuart, you have any, and it was because you should all look it up. SHIT, and you'll get a hall of fame of all the people who stood up for human rights across the United States. And so Stuart's on the list, and maybe because of right of return.
I think so. I can't remember.
And it might have been his protesting for African American rights, because there's a lot of things that happened at Cleveland State. And that guy, the Nazi that was killing people at Cleveland State, was waiting outside of Stuart's classroom one night when he was caught. Is that correct?
Right.
So Stuart has stood up for some things. We had some great people in this room. I haven't even named half of them, but I admire Stuart so much. And young man, we did introductions.
My name is Jeff.
Thank you. Is that enough, or do you want to say anything else?
Well, there's not a whole lot to say.
While we're on the subject of Caterpillar, I just would like to bring up the incident of Rachel Corrie, who actually got bulldozed in Israel during a peaceful protest, if we all recall. It
Of the
was
destruction of a doctor's house.
it was a D10 or 9L Caterpillar bulldozer that was supplied, provided for, paid for by the U.S. as well.
Thank you. Let's go back and let you guys talk, because I think you benefit from seeing who's in this room. I'm sorry we didn't have a huge crowd today, but the quality makes up for the quantity.
Yeah, and Evergreen College is where she went to school, and they have a fantastic divestment campaign. Like, we do a lot from their website. If you ever look it up, like, if you ever have anyone asking you difficult questions about these issues, their frequently asked questions page is like phenomenal, and it's very accessibly written. I like it as well. I look at it a lot for like guidance on how we should do stuff.
What
Do you have
Evergreen
State, it's in Oregon.
Do you have the others?
Oregon?
If you just look up Evergreen College divestment, it'll come right.
Does Oberlin have any educational exchanges with Israel?
We had a program that was run by 2 history professors the past few years that isn't running anymore for a lot of reasons. It was a class called American Democracies, and so it was a class that was taught at Oberlin, and then they would have Skype conversations with students at with Al-Quds, and I think some students at Berzate as well. So like those, like everyone was taking like the same class. They would have Skype conversations, and then over the summer they did a program where Israeli and Palestinian students came to Oberlin and did like a week here of like different things, and then went to DC. Went to DC for a little while as well. I don't know. It was an interesting course because the premise of it was American democracies and like kind of talk. I don't know.
I never took it, and it no longer exists. So I can't really speak to it.
Yeah, last year was the last year that they ran it.
Sorry to talk about it. What was it? The Supreme Court Justice Brandeis once made the statement that you can have an extreme disparity of wealth and income. You can have democracy. You can't have both. We have the greatest disparity of wealth and income in the world.
That's right. Very good.
And it's getting worse.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's all we have. So if you guys have more questions.
I've introduced Jeff. Jeff has been working in the trenches since he was in kindergarten. Correct, Jeff? And certainly, Jeff had a political group and still active in Greater Cleveland Arab American Association. There was Access before Jeff. And it's been in the Democratic Party. So Jeff has been working in the Democratic Party in Kiowa County for years, to bring the Arab American point of view, and he was Dennis Kucinich, peace diver. Dennis,
What's your full name, please?
Jeff Kassouf.
Oh.
Jeff, do you have any comments at this point in the program?
There.
You must have something about how's America doing? His brother went to Lebanon to live, so he has a brother living in a danger zone. Jeff, say something about it.
Well, I think a lot of the people here, I commend you for the campaign that you're putting on, and I think that's a very pragmatic and realistic approach to take there at the campus. I think a lot of the people here are reaching out or searching for ways to implement BDS in our everyday lives in some form or fashion. And I wonder if you have some ideas for us in that area.
Yes. The way that I think that one can be involved in BDS as an individual, which I think is very effective, is one, I know a lot of people who participate in cultural, consumer boycotts themselves, and won't buy certain products, and not only do they not buy them, but they'll tell, like, store owners, or if it's a chain, like, they'll contact the chain and say, I'm no longer purchasing this product, or I'm no longer shopping at your store for X, Y, and Z reasons. And we'll let them know, not just to not do it yourself, but to let people know you're not doing it. And the other way I think that one can participate in BDS is telling other people that it exists. Because there's this incredible inaccurate stereotype of Palestinian people as being like only violent, like terror. You know, like the mainstream media portrays like terrorism as like part of the Palestinian DNA, which is like ridiculous. And so to tell people that this international nonviolent movement that coming out of Palestine exists and that it's like so important, I think just people don't even know that it is real, you know, and they're saying, oh, well, where are like the nonviolent Palestinian voices? It just means you're not listening. And so to tell other people that it exists, I think is good.
That's why I suggested that
Right.
you write something and send it to student newspapers at
Yeah.
all of the colleges.
I don't
Okay,
know.
that's where you have to begin, because if you notice, there are gray heads in here. The people who were activists of the 60s are dying off. We have to have a new generation,
Right.
okay?
You're teaching
Here
at
they are.
college,
Here they are.
Yeah, CSU now.
so she's struggling with this with her college students. Do you have a comment on the students today that you see?
Yeah, and I often wonder, I'm an African-American history teacher. So I'm very interested that all of you have some diversity in your educational program. Those are areas that are being cut, and when we retire, they're not being replaced, they're dying off.
Right.
So they bring up an awareness that nothing else can do. When I wrote an article here for an alternative press after we returned from Israel Palestine trip, and I talked about Independence Day, and the person who was the editor of that press was one of my former students, and he informed me all of the problems, okay, and the calls he received. And I didn't say one thing. I compared it to Black history, okay, when free blacks were not free. And I didn't say one thing that we did not see personally. Okay, I didn't say anything about what I heard, just what I saw and experienced. And that was a problem. That's why I think it's you have to deal with these comparisons and take a little risks, because I make a lot of comparisons in my Black history course to issues, okay, in the Middle East. Because I think you have to think about other regions, and I shame my students for their ignorance.
Could Doug say something about interfaith peace builders, because you've had 3 African-American people come back and you did a wonderful thing in your church just about a month ago. If you could pitch, Doug is now going to be, National Director of Interfaith Peace Builders? I'll make you talk.
Interfaith Peace Builders is a national organization based in Washington that sends delegations to Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories, primarily to meet with nonviolent activists, both Israelis and Palestinians, who are working for peaceful resolution and end of the occupation. There have been 2 African American heritage delegations, which involved 3 people from Northeast Ohio, and they're available to speak at churches or community centers or colleges. And they make the analogy which you described, the civil rights movement and segregation in the United States, to what they observed there. They recently tried to meet with Marcia Fudge, who is our local representative, but she kind of brushed them off.
And I would add that Gloria Brown, 2 years ago, was in this room. She grew up in Mississippi in the 50s, became a teacher, and now is a PhD. And when she did the presentation, as you're doing, she put a chart on the board, and on one side was Palestine, on the other was Mississippi, and she ran a point-by-point analysis straight down. So, Dorothy, you might want to get to know Gloria Brown if you don't know her.
Yeah.
Do you know her?
No.
But she's available, and she would talk. If you have classes, I'll hook you up, because these speakers, they're magnificent. I thought Reverend Lee and Dr. Banks, who's a neuroscientist, kind of hard to say that they're very calm and quiet and very passionate all at the same time. Excuse me for talking too much, but we brought up so much tonight in this room because of you guys coming. So thank you, but keep going. What's more questions?
We tie him down once in a while.
Yes, go ahead.
It comes to mind when Dr. Dorothy Salem was speaking of comparisons between the African American experience and the Palestinian experience. I see such a comparison between the Palestinian experience that this gentleman described to the experience of the family of the 2 terrorists who bombed the Boston Marathon. Same being thrown out of your land, trying to come back, it's taken over by somebody else, and that can turn either to a non-violent way of fighting back, or like those 2 brothers fought back. It's the same might makes right versus peace, that's going on all over the world, Palestine and Chechnya and African America, all over the world. And we're all involved, especially when our taxes are involved, and because we're all humans and it's human rights.
Can I ask
Human rights.
Don to speak to the coming gang summit, which the Peace in the Hood, Khalid Samadi led one of our peace action meetings 2 summers ago, but just a quick synopsis of, is there kind of an occupation of the city of Cleveland with the police shooting 137 people? Go ahead, you can take it.
Yes. Well, we had a recent shooting by the Cleveland police with 137 bullets of 2 unarmed African Americans on November 29th, 2012. And I've been working a lot with the different organizations, largely African American groups, Black on Black Crime, Peace in the Hood, Task Force for Community Mobilization, Carl Stokes Brigade, and there's a couple others. And we're asking for the prosecutor, Timothy McGinty, to recuse himself from the case, asking for a federal investigation, asking for Senate hearings, public Senate hearings as well, and we'll be turning those petitions in soon. The city of Cleveland is soon to, the county is soon to make its proclamation of whether or not this 137 shots, we call it the Cleveland atrocity, was justifiable homicide or not, and there'll be a large protest at the next city council meeting on April 29th, preceding this proclamation by the city. If it's ruled justifiable homicide, no one's safe.
And I would add that Alice Walker and Cynthia McKinney have gone on the Gaza boats, and they draw this analogy, and I was going to try to add one. Oh,
but I'll add the part about the summit, the gang summit. There's a National Anti-Gang Summit every year, and this year it's in Cleveland. And the Task Force for Community Mobilization is the host. They've been written up in the Plain Dealer a few weeks ago on this gang summit, which is coming on June 30th, that weekend, that last weekend in June.
CSU?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly where it's at, so follow.
We'll
Get
send
back to us.
I would add that my experience, I'm retired, and I taught in the inner city school. It was my second teaching experience after Beirut, Lebanon. It was my first experience in a foreign culture. And it changed me forever, teaching the Huff, between the Huff and the Glenville Riots. But what I see with what I've been doing. And I have this in my heart and my head, but when I started going to Peace in the Hood, I was driving kids to their after-school program down to Imperial Avenue, where the 9 or 11 women now? 11 men and women were murdered and were not investigated for 2 or 3 years. It's a long story. But I also started going to the vigils for the people who were shot in the streets. And Khalid and Art McCoy, Black on Black, and Peace in the Hood run these vigils on the spot where the person died. And I've been to a dozen or more, several dozen, and to stand there and hear the brothers and sisters, the mothers and fathers. I met the sister of the man, Russell, who was killed by the police, and I talked to her, and she gave a Martin Luther King speech at a vigil downtown. So we have connections we've got to make, but it makes me think of the Palestinian funerals. If the Palestinian funerals become a community event, and tragedy brings people out and unifies them, and I think that what I miss is the most segregated hour in American life is often Sunday morning, but it's also at a vigil for a murdered African American child. And so going there, I'm surprised. I'm a white person going to a ghetto where there are black people mourning, and I've basically been welcomed every single time. The first couple times I was nervous, but I think that we could, one of those vigils was on Shaker Square at the supermarket, and there were 100 people on the street at the bus stop, and we didn't have any non-African, there were no Anglo-Americans, or 1 or 2 in the whole crowd, and that's where we should have built community, where there should have been 30 or 40 people from Shaker supporting that community who's lost their valuable child. It reminds me of Palestine, so thank you.
And just quickly, there's apartheids everywhere. I mean, in every city, every major city in America has such divisions. Chicago, you know, they got their south side where the African Americans are congregated and living in squalor often. Same in Cleveland. And then in the suburbs, right here, I mean, I live in the suburbs, and we don't often know what's going on across the borders, across the river. So apartheid's in Palestine, Israel, apartheid's in the U.S. It's a class struggle, and we need to band together, work together. You know, the Latinos are fighting the same battles as the African Americans, but they're not working together too often. So